All right, so this discussion was with Michael Pritchard, and we touched on a variety of topics, and I want to kind of add an introduction here before the discussion starts, primarily because there's two things that I realized listening back through this. And the first is that something I kind of knew immediately after the discussion, but just became more obvious as I was doing the editing. I didn't spend enough time, I think, trying to understand what Michael's theological position was prior to the discussion. And what you'll hear in the first, essentially the first half of this discussion is at many points, I'm kind of trying to engage with a theological position that doesn't exist in as far as my opponent's theology goes. So it's sort of we're kind of talking past each other, and like I said, I'm sort of trying to engage with a position that I thought he held, but that now I understand that he didn't. So, and then second from that is that we really touched on way too many topics. So what I'm trying to keep in mind now is, as I look at who the next discussion will be with and everything, is trying to make sure that I limit what the topic is. Hopefully Michael's open to doing another discussion, and what I would like to do one on is just not in any kind of debate or confrontational manner, but just on fleshing out what his theological position is. Because as you'll hear in here, there's at some points it even seems like a kind of theistic nihilism. It's definitely something that I'm interested in getting to understand and know more about. But it's something that I should have made clearer to myself prior to doing this discussion. So if you listen to this and get kind of frustrated, I understand. So hopefully you enjoy it. It's a discussion with Michael Pritchard, and let me know what you think. All right. So I went back through our text conversation.
Okay.
I read through it this morning, trying to figure out exactly what we had started talking about. Do you remember the subject we were on? Oh, you made notes?
I did not make notes. I'm gonna make notes.
Okay.
Or it won't be worth it.
So what started the conversation was the
deism.
Yeah, the quote I shared from Thomas Paine, I think, right?
Yep.
Is that what started the conversation? Okay. And we started essentially into talking about essentially the value of evidence, or rather the need of evidence. And
your need for evidence.
Yeah. So that's what seems to be most of our conversation was about, that, the need.
Correct.
And what I think would be interesting place to start would be the distinction between belief versus disbelief versus belief in the contrary. So I'm not an atheist, but
belief
versus disbelief versus belief in the contrary, because those are three different things.
Belief versus disbelief.
Yeah, versus belief in the contrary. So when we start talking about deism, I was saying that the deist, my position as a deist anyway, is that I have heard convincing arguments for the existence of God, the creator of the universe, but have not heard convincing arguments for that God provided a revelation to anyone, talks directly to anybody, intervenes in the universe at all. That's where I feel like the evidence hasn't been sufficient, And that was where our conversation kind of started, because you didn't like the idea of saying that you would disbelieve something that hadn't been proven to you. Think that's kind of fair to say?
Potentially. My problem is the whole need to prove it.
Right.
I don't need to prove it. I don't understand if it is deity and it is all powerful, or even just more powerful than I am because he's deity and I'm not. How can I prove it? I don't have any way of understanding
So I think
how it can do it or what it can do or anything, because I can't do it. So how do I prove it? And then I don't even want to be a fanatical and prove it. Like, it's enough for me just to exist and believe it.
so. I think to me the idea is not so much about I need to be able to prove it, as in I need to be able to show myself that I am sufficiently convinced. Not that like I need to be able to prove. So if I believe that, let's say, I'm a Muslim and I believe that Muhammad is God's
Prophet.
messenger,
Yeah.
right? It wouldn't so much be what would push me back to deism wouldn't so much be I can't prove to you that Muhammad is God's messenger, but
Correct.
it would be that I couldn't prove it to myself. That I would, and again, I don't know that much about Islam. I'm just using this as an example. So for me, when it comes to stepping beyond the belief of God's existence into now I also believe that God's had this special conversation with somebody or that he's intervened in whatever way, I try to guard my beliefs. And the best way to guard your beliefs and make sure you're not believing something that's untrue is to make sure that it's supported before you believe it. And so this is what I wanted to bring up with belief versus disbelief versus belief in the contrary. I'm not an atheist, but Matt Dillahunty, do you know who he is?
Mm.
He's really good on this point. And the example, it
What's
works
his
really
last
good.
name?
Dillahunty. I think it's Dillahunty, something like that. He's an atheist and he's got this call-in show, and usually he's on YouTube a lot of people. And I don't think he's on the call-in show anymore. But anyway, there's an example that he uses that communicates this. So if I have a jar of jelly beans here, let's say I've got this big jar of jelly beans, it's just a fact that there is either an odd number of jelly beans or an even number, one or the other. Now, if let me switch that around. So let's say you say to me there is an odd number of jelly beans. You've got no evidence to support your claim, so I'm going to say I don't believe you. But that doesn't mean that I believe there's an even number. That just means I'm not convinced of what you were claiming, of that to know that it's odd.
I haven't counted it in front of you.
Right. So
we haven't got to the number.
Right. We're just looking.
You're unsure because it's still 50-50.
Right.
It could be odd. It could be even.
Yeah. So that's what I think the important thing is, since we're talking about belief, is belief versus disbelief. So you believe or would claim there's an odd number, and then I disbelieve you. But that's not that I believe the contrary. So if I disbelieve your claim and say I'm not convinced that you even know, it doesn't mean that I believe that there's an even number. It just means I'm not convinced of the claim that there's an odd number. Somehow that relates to the conversation we're having. I think it's because I would not say as a deist that God cannot intervene in the universe. What I would say is I've not been convinced by the arguments that he has. Does that make sense?
It does, which is why I believe I asked you if you had ever had a personal experience to which you thought that deity did intervene or agents of deity has, and you said no.
Right.
So that's not surprising that you would ever believe that it is there if it hasn't happened to you.
Right.
But I guess my initial disinterest with deism, after I was kind of curious and saw the quote and then joined the group and went through quickly reading it, is that it appeared that the majority of that group enjoys or gets off on the argument that they know can't be proven, and they just kept showing up with the fact that we'll prove it. And they enjoyed that whoever they're arguing with can't prove it, which I do agree. There is no way for me to prove that there is a deity or that he's ever intervened.
So I think
But I don't need that proof to hold on that I believe that there is a higher power and that he has intervened in my life up to this point several times.
So some of our conversation that we had over text was about believing other people's claims about God intervening in their life, or disbelieving them, or
I can't do either or.
if I come to you and say, God told me something, or you came to me and said, God told you something, especially if it was something to do with me, which is, in the end, I think, for most religions, what's going on. Someone is claiming that they know that God told somebody else something that has to do with me. That seems to be the case.
Can I interject for just a moment?
Yep.
Who's to say it's the religion and not the person interjecting their thing? That's what everybody keeps saying. They keep painting with broad strokes and say, well, this is Christianity. There's 2 million people that represent Christianity. But how do we prove that all those 2 million people really do represent Christianity and they're not representing their own version, or just saying they're a Christian to get a foothold to be able to get there? So you're saying a lot of religions are doing that, but is it really the religion, or is it the person that's making that claim?
It seems to be whoever wrote the book. Wouldn't you think?
I don't think it's the person that wrote the book. We're not arguing with that person. We're arguing with other people about their interpretations of a book that was printed at some point, which was before we were here. So we can't prove whoever wrote that book wrote that book.
Sure.
The same way we can't prove that it's odd or even. Right. We weren't there when it was written. We didn't count it. But how do we know it wasn't the slave in the corner that wrote it and had the epiphany and somebody stole it from him and wrote it down?
I guess maybe I should back up a little further then, because to make the observation that we don't know who wrote the books, we don't know if they've got any legitimacy at all, that seems to be a claim or a position or an observation pointed out by the non-believers. Do you believe there's anything special about any of the books at all? I guess I don't really know your religious position.
I find value in most of the books I've read of almost all the religions. My faith in deity is not based on a book, a particular book. Because you're right, I can't prove who actually wrote that book. I wasn't there 2,000 years ago. I'm not even sure I believe in carbon dating and science, like I told you before. I'm not 100% sure. I guess it stems from the beginning. I'm more like a flow chart. The beginning, deity is all powerful. It can do whatever it wants to do. So who am I to put boundaries on it? I believe 2 plus 2 is 4 only because deity allows it. And at any point, deity could change 2 plus 2 to be 5. And then it is no longer fact. So I have a problem believing in fact. I don't have any concrete evidence on anything. Just like tomorrow you can decide you don't even want to be a man anymore. And now you're not a man. Or you could change your name and you're not Isaiah anymore.
Right.
And then you can be whatever you want to be. It's a fact that you're Isaiah today because you say it is. But tomorrow you might want to change it and then you're never Isaiah again. I believe that deity can still create. Just because he rested supposedly on the 7th day doesn't mean he couldn't start picking back up on day 8 and doing whatever he wants. If there is a deity and a creator and he created things, why can't he keep creating now? What says he's done? So that's why I believe we do find new species now. It may not be evolution. It could be evolution if that's what he wants. He might say, hey, I want it to start out as a purple snail, and then one day he's like, I think I kind of like pink, so let's change him to pink. Or whatever, and they do it, and then, oh, well, how do I get it to be pink? Maybe if I move the the sun a millimeter from where I put it before. It'll get a little more rotisserie over here, but then it'll kill off this other thing over here.
Right.
I don't know. So at the very basis, I believe in a deity that is more powerful than me, and I believe in a creator, and I believe he can still do, or she or it can still do whatever it did at the beginning.
Okay, so
I don't believe creation's over.
I guess
I can't prove any of it.
So let's take the mathematics example. 2 and 2 is 4. Maybe tomorrow 2 and 2 will be 5. So the words, mathematics itself, the language used for it, by my assessment, is human invention. The language we use for it. So the word 2 is how we've defined it, and unless someone changes the definition of these words, like 2 and plus and 2 and equals and 4, that can never be anything other than 2 and 2 equals 4.
Okay. Can you name one fact that isn't human derived?
Well, in order to describe it, we would have to use human language.
That's the problem, huh? And in my opinion, humans are flawed and not deity. Well, so it's not a truth. It's not a universal truth.
So if I use the language that says, I have a glass in my hand, well, we've defined what all those words mean. So because we have created the language that says this glass is in my hand, that means that it isn't necessarily true, or it isn't necessarily a fact. It seems to me that if the word fact means anything, that it would apply there.
Now we got to figure out if that has any correlation on life, the universe, death, anything in the future. Well, so why do we want to sit there and?
Well, that would be a different question. I'm just saying. You said what's a fact that we could, observe and acknowledge, and it seems like that's one we could observe and acknowledge. I have a glass in my hand. Sort of like I think, therefore I am. If I'm thinking about something, then my mind is processing.
Okay. So is there any truth you can think of that is worth arguing, talking about, spreading the word, enlightening other people about?
Sure.
Because nobody gives a shit if we got a glass in there.
Well, remember, we're just talking about what fact can we observe? What fact can we say?
Okay. Is there a significant fact you can think about?
Well, there's a reason all these discussions that I have are centered around religion, because it seems to me that the nature of our existence and meaning and what happens after we die and all these sort of things, morality, is the most important subject that we could be discussing. I wouldn't waste my time discussing other things. This is beneficial to me. If we're going to talk about anything, this is somewhere we know that is a meaningful topic. Talking about what we can believe about, as you say, God, the universe, and everything. What we can believe about that. Feels like that's a profitable, beneficial use of time.
But do you ever think you can get there?
Get where?
To the answer.
And
is there ever going to be a word spoken, a fact observed through discourse from somebody else that can finally nail that answer down for you?
I think that's
to make you believe.
I think that's why I'm not an atheist.
I mean, you keep looking, but is there a probability that there is an answer out there that would stop you from looking, and you would have peace in your heart, and you would think you would know the answer, and you'd be satisfied with it?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's
cool.
There's got to be.
I hope you find it.
If there's truth, let's say, to the Christian story, if there's truth to that, there would have to be some argument somewhere that could be made that would make it a reasonable belief to hold.
And you just don't think you've heard it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't know how many of the videos you watched on my little
I
YouTube
don't even
channel.
think I watched one.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't know. I might have started one and then didn't finish it.
So,
Like I said, I got somewhat frustrated that night. I was tired and
right,
I got bored with the whole subject. And
right.
like I said, it seems to be that whole section of deists just enjoy argument for
Well,
the sake of argument.
yeah. So that's
And a lot of them are getting off on, I can't wait to bash this person because he can't prove anything. And I'm like, you're right. They can't prove it. There's nothing anybody's ever going to say that's going to change your mind. You're going
right.
to have an
So,
interaction with something that you think is deity to be able to prove it to you. You're never going to take another person's word for it.
so two things that I want to point out there. First is that I think what you're saying is applicable to everyone in their belief.
You think everybody enjoys beating somebody up
No.
over their...
Everyone is convinced of their belief, and it's just a question of whether or not they're looking for ways to challenge their own belief or not. I don't know that there's that many people out there that are truly open to the idea that they're wrong. But the other thing I wanted to say is, if you're looking at a Facebook group on religion, it's going to be a bunch of arguing people. This is true about
keyboard warriors.
Yeah, that's Facebook. I wouldn't say that is a trait of deism. I would say that that's.
You don't think that's a trait of Thomas Paine?
Sure. No, that's what he was doing, because there was no.
He loved arguing with Christians.
Yeah, because it seems to me, anyway. Again, I'm not that informed.
I think he would have used Facebook if he had it.
Yeah,
I definitely think he would have.
I think pamphleteering
been an online troll.
Yeah, pamphleteering was about as close as it gets to Facebook back then.
Right. And he did it.
He had a lot of interest, it seems to me, in influencing the best he could the development of the New World, the beginning of America. And so it seemed to me like he really wanted to make sure that America was not going to be a theocracy, and that freedom of religion was just as important as freedom from religion. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be his main driving force. But again, this is what a lot of people get confused about deism, is that deism didn't start with Thomas Paine, and he's not like the Jesus of deism. He's just one of the people that argued for it in the past. So just observing the initial fact, the initial claim of deism is that there is a creator of the universe. I'm sure all deists arrive at that conclusion in different ways, however they want to. For me, there was just a certain argument that I couldn't find any issues with that was convincing. So that's where my belief arrived at. There is a creator of the universe. And beyond that, Thomas Paine would talk about somebody's creed, and then what is an aspect of their creed, or what's a component of their creed. Have you heard the Apostles' Creed before?
Mm-hmm. I can't recite it, but
I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and the earth, and then Jesus Christ, his Son, and it goes through all these elements of belief. And, of course, for the Catholics, it includes the procession of saints, and for some Catholic derivatives, it still includes the communion of saints. But one of the first sort of element of any religious position, at least as far as I understand the term religion, is the belief in a God. And to push it beyond that, to go further beyond that, to believe more things about that God is to, make claims that seem to me to need to be defended or supported somehow. And when I look at, if Christianity is true, there's certain ways that people live their life that's now subject to at least you could say the current literacy, the current literal meaning of the book. That there's ways to, and then the same thing could be said about Islam and Judaism. So what's dependent on this claim that God had intervened and given somebody revelation has a direct impact on my life. If I believe it, then my life looks very different. And that's what I've remained to be convinced of, and what our conversation had gone to before
How
was,
different would your life be if you believed somebody really had a revelation?
well,
Is it jealousy that you haven't had that revelation and that person did? And why did your God reveal it to somebody and not reveal it to you, even though you've been asking for a sign for
sure.
40 years?
It's not jealousy, at least in my estimation. It's not jealousy. Let me give you an example. So there's one of the little videos on my channel. I go in depth into this story of something that happened in West Virginia. It was a girl younger than one. She was less than 1 year old, and her stepfather. And it's not worth going into detail, but she didn't live. Okay, she didn't make it through what he did, and nobody stopped him. And it seems to me that we live in a universe where if we don't stop him, nobody is. And if I'm convinced of a religious position that says that God can intervene and is a moral observant, aware of everything and able to stop and think and consider, and like the theistic God, the one that sees these things happening, if I believe that that were true, then I would have to believe that there was some good in not stopping him. That's why I would be a different person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't agree with it.
Well, so
because now again you're limiting your deity to have to think like you.
Sure.
You stripped your deity of all its free will,
right,
to do what it wanted to do based off of what you conceive as good and bad.
Okay, so then let's imagine, all right, this deity just had the free will to decide not to. Okay, and say
in my book, he had the free will not to create the kid to be there in the first place. He had the free will not to create the monster that did whatever he did to this girl in this case.
But he did. Okay.
But it did happen.
Yeah. So let's carry that out. So, or kind of open that up and lay that out. So we could carry on the actions of that deity to, he created the man, he created the girl, he let this event happen.
Correct.
Did nothing to stop it. And someone's going to tell me that he's worthy of worship. See, that whole direction of that God does not give me a good God.
But if he interferes, then you have no free will.
No, that's not necessarily true.
It is.
Because
he would have to stop everything that you deem as bad.
So no. Okay, so that means that good and bad become subjective.
It is.
Was what that man did bad or not?
I don't know. I don't know what he did because we stopped it short. I'm sure we can go into rape, murder,
all of that. Okay,
and I'm not going to go on record and say that's ever a good thing.
Exactly,
it's not.
Exactly. So,
but
just remember,
to stop somebody from doing that is taking that person's free will from doing it.
No. So if you go to kill somebody and I kill you, you still had the free will to kill them, even if I stop you. That's not removing your free will.
Yeah, it is. Did
No,
you
it
stop
isn't.
me from doing it?
No, it means you're unsuccessful, but it doesn't remove your free will. It doesn't mean that you can't decide to do it. That's what removing free will is, to make it to where somebody can't decide to do it.
Ooh.
If someone can decide to kill somebody, even if they're stopped beforehand, their free will is still there. They can still have made that decision. So, but let's start there. So, I think that was an important observation to make. We look at what this guy did to this girl that was less than 1 year old. By any rational moral mind can see that event and say what he did was wrong. Now, it's also true to say that to believe in the theistic God is to say that there was some good in allowing it to happen, which puts you in immediate contradiction with your own moral conscience. So, do you?
I don't know. I don't
like
agree with
the
that.
idea. I don't like the idea of saying, okay, what I see this guy did, I see that as wrong. But I'm being presented with a belief where I would have to view that as good.
I don't think that the act is now good.
Well, because how could God still be good and not stop it?
How do you have to define God as good or bad?
You don't. But
those are human terms. Those are human beliefs.
You don't, but religion does. If that's a very deeply ingrained part of revealed religion is that God is good.
I don't know about that.
Or else whatever he reveals doesn't have to be trusted.
I think the word good and bad and the idea of good and bad are made up by people.
Okay, so I have to go back to that then. Looking at what that guy did, you think it's just a made up concept that it's bad?
I mean, I agree it's bad.
Okay.
That person might not have agreed it's bad. And that person was a person that breathed air and everything. So how am I morally superior to that person?
Because you didn't do it.
I didn't.
Everyone who doesn't do that is morally superior to all those who do.
Okay. So what happens when I murder somebody else? I drove drunk and killed somebody on the road.
Right.
Am I no longer morally superior, or is it different shades of gray? That killing somebody in a car is much better than killing less than a 1 year old. I would argue raping and murdering a 70-year-old is just as bad as a less than 1 year old.
They're both bad, but the problem is
they're both invalids, or it can be.
They're both bad, but the thing is that what the reason the story of the girl is so much more important is that it doesn't give people the out of saying that she lived a life that would deserve it. And you'd be surprised how many people have said that.
Okay, so now that takes me to a different point. You're worried about an afterlife and everything. I'm trying to figure out a pre-life. I'm not as concerned.
Like before you're born?
Yep. I'm not as concerned with what happens after this life, but where I was before I was conceived and became a human.
Okay. So that would be a conversation about like reincarnation, maybe.
No, because I don't even necessarily believe that we were a human beforehand or an animal or whatever. I don't even know if we were on Earth to begin with. But I believe in a soul. And that's what makes people unique, is that there is an unquantifiable soul aspect to us that's not the brain, that's not the heart.
Yeah.
You know, but it had to come from somewhere to come into that fetus and then be born. So, in your analogy of the less than 1 year old, that less than 1 year old might have already been millions of years old spirit before it ever became a human. And now you're saying that the human experience is the end all be all, and it just might be the medium part, the middle.
Yeah. So
you got a beginning and an end. This might be the middle. So whatever happens to us here, we as humans think in our little world that we're the end all be all, we're the top of the food chain. This whole world's about me. This whole world's about you. But then you're leaving out 2/3 of the possibility of a pre-life and an afterlife. And is it really that important?
I don't think it leaves out the possibility of those things, but I would definitely say that I would not say that I'm convinced there was anything before.
I don't know.
You know,
I'm not trying to convince you of anything. You made it a point that you're a deist, and you gotta have proof to yourself to do it. And I am in no way, shape, or form ever going to talk to you to try to prove anything to you.
Right. So
that's not on my agenda. I don't give a shit if you ever believe a word that comes out of my mouth, or change your opinion.
The one thing I want to make sure is clear before we get into this.
I mean, I'm not going on video and saying a 1-year-old being raped and murdered is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I personally don't believe that is. I would try to kill the guy beforehand.
Yeah.
If it was possible.
So tell me this.
However, I am not going to say that 10 months they were alive was the end-all be-all for that spirit. So it might not be the worst thing that ever happens to them for the rest of that spirit's life. And it might not have been the best thing.
Sure.
But living another 70 years paying taxes and putting up with bullying and all the other bullshit is not necessarily make a strong case to me that they would have had a better life or it would have been any better. I mean, who knows? What if they didn't do it and then they grew up and then ended up in a concentration camp and then burned and raped every day of their life?
So
that would be worse than it being done once and killing me.
I think that's sort of a morally treacherous path to go down, because it rides on a lot of hypotheticals and what ifs that are not supported by anything. And that's always whenever somebody brings up a hypothetical future. What if this would have happened?
Well, that's what we have to. You have to hypothetical it because that kid doesn't have that future.
Yeah, I don't think that's.
There is no future, so you can't say that it's the worst thing.
So all we can do is look at what happened.
Right.
And you would agree with me if I would say it would have been better if someone had stopped him. We don't have, based on our available evidence, we can say that, can't we?
No, because I'm not going to sit there and say that him getting bored or whatever and then finally killing him is worse than him getting bored, going away for a day, coming back and doing the exact same thing the next day, and then getting bored and coming back and doing the exact same thing and stretching it out over a year or two while it's a missing person and then killing him. That would be way worse, in my opinion, than it happening once and killing him.
I may have misdescribed my question here. So you're presented with the scenario. Let's say you're placed in the scenario. This guy is going to do this to this girl. You see this happening. You know that this is what's going to happen. Can you not say that it is better for you to stop him than to let him go?
Yes.
You can say that.
Well, I would try. I believe it's better.
Okay, so now let's place two.
But I can't make it a universal truth.
No,
because my opinion.
Let's place two of us there. There's two of us seeing what's going on. One of us chooses to stop him. Can you not say that that person is behaving more morally than the other person?
By my guidelines.
By your guidelines. Okay, so take that, and all you have to do is conceptualize the other person as God, and saying God could have, but chose not to.
Oh, I know he could have.
Right.
I believe he could have.
Right. So that's the.
I believe he has the power to stop it all.
That's the position that. What I'm trying to make sure is clear.
The position I have is that who am I to say I am morally superior to God.
Right, exactly. We don't want to say that. So the theist position makes it to where that's unavoidable. That's how I see it. Because to be a theist and see what happened to that girl puts me unavoidably in a morally superior position because I would have stopped it. That's what the theistic God is.
But you're not a deity.
That's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm trying to show is how the belief in a theistic God makes me perceive life differently than how I do now. That was the question I was trying to get at that you asked earlier. How would my life be different? That I would see everything different, and I would see some
Sure.
kind of silver lining in what happened to her. Well, it must have been that if she had lived, something awful would have happened, and that this is what had to happen to her because somehow this avoided a really terrible the
She
most
could have she could have perpetuated the
right.
thing, and like you said, we keep going down the what
Yeah,
ifs.
yeah.
And there's nothing to say they would, but
But
she could grow up to be a rapist herself because she got diddled and then
exactly.
does it to another, and it just,
So that means that becoming a theist means that I'm going to view a 1-year-old girl this happened to and say there must have been something awful that she would have become or done later.
you don't know that bad things can happen to good people.
Right. That's the observable fact of the universe that can't be avoided is that bad things happen to good people. And that's the what
Bad things happen to bad people. Bad things
yeah.
happen.
Right. So this is an example, in my estimation, of a bad thing happening to a good person. But theism and the religious position puts you in a place where you have to conclude that there was some silver lining here, or else a good God would have stopped this. There has to be some reason that it was allowed to happen, and it means that you have to assume some invisible play behind the scenes that's playing out right, and that I'm mistaken in saying he should have been stopped. That I'm somehow wrong in that. And that's a really hard pill to swallow.
You see, I still don't see it that way. No matter how many times you explain it or something, I don't believe it has to go. I don't think the silver lining forces you to inaction or to let it go because you don't want to fix the future. I mean, it's not some Back to the Future movie where you go back in time and you bet on something and then all of a sudden
right.
You're a bajillionaire and then your mom didn't get with your dad and then you were never born. That whole time continuum. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to take a point in time and then trying to game and theorize a bajillion different outcomes of that action or inaction, and it's infinite.
Yeah, and so
it's infinite out there. It's undescribable. It's an undefined.
I would say the ones trying to gain the billion different outcomes are the theists. In my estimation, I'm looking at the one event and saying this was an immoral act, should have been stopped by anyone and everyone able to stop it, and it wasn't. It seems to me that we live in a universe in which whatever we want to do, nobody's going to stop us if we don't. If we don't stop that person from doing that, no one will. But we live in a universe that has every hallmark of not having any moral intervening observer. That's the universe that it appears we live in.
Maybe, and that's sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you think of it that way, if you choose to believe it that way, then the action means nothing either.
Well,
stopping that person meant nothing. Because there is no cause and effect. If there was a deity that allowed the bad thing to happen and he didn't intervene, then you really didn't change anything by intervening.
Well, that's the difference
because
between,
the next day it's going to happen all over again to somebody else, and somebody's not going to be there.
well, that's the difference between the deistic God and the theistic God. So the deistic God is a creator, sometimes not quite conceptually appropriate, but sometimes referred to as the person that wound the clock and let it start, that started everything in motion. But the deistic God, by my estimation, is not one that you would refer to as being sort of here watching our conversation, or there watching what happened to that girl
But why can't
choosing
they?
not to or not.
Why are they not powerful enough to
No,
notice
I didn't say not powerful enough. I'm saying that we don't have any indication that that is the case. So we don't have anything, there's nothing about the universe that suggests that there's a moral observant intervening God. Because I can go across the street and kill somebody if I want. Nobody's going to stop me if another human doesn't do it. So that's the difference between the theistic God and the deistic God, is because it's, to me, the deistic God is the only one that explains the universe that we live in.
Now, you say nobody's going to stop you unless another human does it. I don't know that I'm going to go that far. Like, I can believe it's highly probable nobody is going to stop you from doing that. But there are natural phenomenons that happen. Tree branches fall on people's heads.
Yeah.
And we don't have a reason for why it did it.
Well,
you can't sit there and math it down to the integrity of the branch deteriorated at the exact same time that Mike walked out of his front door, and it just happened to fall. That could be a divine thing. It could be an act by an agent of the divine, not even necessarily divine.
Yeah, it could be that, like, if
highly improbable, I believe, if you really set your mind to walk across the street and go shoot whoever's over there.
Yeah,
I got a good chance that I think you're going to be able to do it.
Right.
Like I would bet that that's going to happen.
Right. So,
but it's not 100%.
So let's say this. Thinking about the idea of the deistic God that's not there observing all these things as a person. If that's true, you would still have these instances where people were unsuccessful. So let's say we find out about another case where somebody is on their way to do this, and somehow we know that. This is a hypothetical. So somehow we know this person's on their way to do this, and they suffer catastrophic heart failure, and they just die on their way to do it. Now, there's two things we could say there. One is that, well, that would happen. Like observing the universe the way it is, tree branches fall. People do suffer catastrophic heart failure. Occasionally, that's going to happen at the right time. Like there's no reason to think that wouldn't be the case in some very small percentage.
Right.
So there's no way to look at that and say, because that small percentage is there, that those would have to be God. So you would still need some sort of all the wicked acts that happen. Let's say we were able to find out, and I don't know how you'd find this out. Let's say we're able to find out that 1%, let's say 1% of them die on their way to go do it. Something happens, a tree limb falls on them, their heart fails.
There's no way to prove that God did it.
There's no way to show that, because these are things that we know would happen in the absence of God doing anything anyway.
Correct.
So we know that tree limbs fall, we know people's hearts fail. Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at.
No, I get you. I just personally don't have the need to explain it, because I believe it's unexplainable.
Okay. But do you see, at least, though, what I mean when I say I would have to view the universe differently if I were a theist? I would have to view
obviously, because I mean that's why deists and theists and atheists and agnostics and all have a title,
right?
Because there's a collection of people that kind of think somewhat similarly,
right. So,
and they want to label it. So you're definitely going to have to see it different if you change your name.
Exactly. Yeah. So I wanted to go. There was a question you asked earlier that sounded like,
I was just asking if there was any proof, if you could think of anything that could prove it to you.
If there was,
And it doesn't seem to me that there is anything that's ever going to change your mind until you have a one-to-one
until God explains it to me.
with your deity
Right.
or an agent of the deity that you can believe is superior to the human thing and believe them, and then somehow not believe that it was a hallucination or some kind of stressor or something.
So let's say tomorrow morning.
And I believe that it does not interact on our whims. I do believe that maybe he doesn't touch or intervene for a long time. But I also don't propose to know that zero good can come from an evil act at some point down the road. It might be 100 years from now. It might be a story, 200 years from now where a kid read about this and he learned how to shoot a gun at 10 months old or something and interact it and then was able to defend himself next time.
Right.
Or, something. I'm just making something stupid up, but
I get it.
I have no idea the ripple effect from any action all the way out to its thing. A good act can have bad consequences.
Sure. Yeah.
Far enough out. I could do something good. I could win $1 million and spend $999,000 of it in a good way, and take $1 and do some bad drug or whatever the hell that shit is that weed's laced with these days, fentanyl, and overdose, and now my kid's homeless and has a lot of money to be able to fuck their life up, and then they never find love, and then and it ripples down generations and generations from something good like, hey, I'm going to go buy a lottery ticket from a friend of mine so he has a job.
Yeah.
I'm going to pump some money into his economy.
I get that,
And then, so I mean, to me, that whole yin yang, yes, it's bad. I would personally stake my my future soul on killing the guy if I ran up on somebody trying to rape a kid. I'm willing to gamble my future, but I'm a gambler too. So, I don't know. Just because I believe in God and I believe He's all powerful, and that good things can come from bad things come from good things, doesn't mean I wouldn't stop them.
Right, but I think what I'm trying to point out there is that the theistic position, like I was saying before, it makes you view the life of the girl differently. So the theistic positions would make you come to the conclusion that what happened to her was wrong. It should have been stopped, if at all possible. And the theistic position, which would be that there's a moral, intervening, observant God, is to say there must have been a silver lining. There must be, and that's a very different kind of utterance to me.
So there's got to be some other category. The intervening God that there is no silver lining from it.
Well, then it's just a God not worthy of worship.
To you.
Yeah. Well,
what's worthy of worship?
So.
Oh, I can't take 30 seconds out of my day to say, love you, God. What is worship?
Okay. So that's a little bit different conversation. So we can kind of shift gears.
I mean, it's easy to say, I don't want to follow that God if that's the way he thinks. But that doesn't stop it from being God. And it demanding its forms of worships and sacrifices.
Right.
You going, I don't want to follow. I want to go to hell if that's the God that I've got to follow. Does not take away that being's divinity.
So that makes proving it all the much more important.
But you might not have the opportunity to prove it.
No.
You are going to die at one day. You are going to learn whether you were right or wrong.
Sure.
And you are still subject to that deity's interpretation of the universe.
Right.
Just because you took the time to not be able to figure it out, or you are incapable of finding that answer, does not remove you from whatever the Creator's plan is for the whole shebang.
Yeah, of course. There's all kinds of, hypotheticals. That's why I said that's why it's important to me, like when talking about an event like that, is to stop right there and say, how are we going to view that event? And it seems to me to be fundamentally different from the deist to the theist, how that event is viewed.
It could be.
But again, it doesn't sound quite like you're a theist.
Okay, maybe I'm not.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. So, in terms of belief,
The way to boil it down as simple as I can. I believe there's a creator. I believe I am not as powerful as a creator. I believe I can never figure out what the creator's plans are because I'm not. I'm not the creator. I can't figure it out.
okay, is there anything?
So I can't assign good, bad, and the thing further than what any human can. I mean, you can look at a mentally retarded person that's got all these things. He might not be able to figure it out, or she might not be able to figure it out either, but that doesn't make them evil because they couldn't figure that out and they can't see the same thing. Like, they might not even understand what a kid is, or an adult, or a good or a bad,
Sure, yeah.
and it just happens to them. But that doesn't make that guy all of a sudden evil because they didn't intervene when they had no idea what was going on. And then you're sitting there taking, well, now we're only talking about people with IQs of 90 plus to know what's good or bad, and then you're segmenting again to, well, then you can just keep segmenting.
Okay, so there was something important there that I heard.
Okay.
So this is gonna sound weird. Okay, but if you say, that someone with a mental condition where they don't observe good or bad, they don't decide to stop that guy from doing that. Can you say they're evil for not stopping? No, you can't, right? Because we've already established the presupposition that they don't understand. They either don't see it right, or they don't see that the moral conflict or whatever. It's a very short step from there to get to the point of, what if the God that we're talking about is not this all-seeing, supremely moral being? And that, again, the deist position is that the way Thomas Paine put it was, the only idea man can affix to God is that of a first cause. That's not saying we believe that God is not observant, or we believe that God is not moral, or that we believe that God is unable to intervene. It means that no one's proven that he has. And no one's proven that, those situations are true. So,
to which I keep coming back to, I don't have to.
No, right. So I'm just talking
about... It's not
my
responsibility to prove that to Mr. Thomas Paine.
No, right. So, again, the important...
And he made a whole life of writing and getting paid to follow all these what-if questions. And did he really add of anything of work to the human race? Did he go out and plow the field and produce food for his family doing that? Or was he just as much a charlatan as a cult leader?
Well,
and gets fed and clothed and all this stuff on what ifs and blah blah blah. Right.
So that's a different discussion. Age of Reason was written near the end of Thomas Paine's life, and he is almost directly responsible for the existence of this country because of the pamphlet he wrote called Common Sense about the rights of man, which were a comparison of the situation in America to England. There was a lot of good.
So is that macaroni in your hat that he got to do all that?
No.
And a girl still got raped in West Virginia?
Wait, just
in this great nation that he helped?
That So that's a different
It's a whole nother
conversation,
different.
because that can happen anywhere on this planet, and from my estimation, it could happen anywhere in the universe. We're on a spaceship; it can happen there. Nobody's going to stop it. We don't. What I was just trying to say was that you were sort of describing Thomas Paine's critique of religion as that's what he made his life on, but it's not.
Okay.
That was very, very close to the end of his life. He wrote The Age of Reason. He didn't. I just wanted to say that. I'm not an expert on Thomas Paine, but I know that was, anyway. I just wanted to say that because of the way that you were describing the situation. So we can kind of shift gears, you could say, into the sort of the hypothetical idea that there was some kind of pre-life and afterlife and everything. So I like the way that Thomas Paine put that, where he said he hoped for happiness beyond this life. And I think that he understood that proving that there's an afterlife is something that may never happen. It may never be proven that there's an afterlife. But we'd be fools not to hope for it. Once we're aware that we're going to die, we'd be fools not to hope.
It doesn't really matter if you never were before.
I think it would.
And if this is the pinnacle of life, and if anything that happens to you here, good or bad, is the end all be all of the worst thing that can ever happen to you, or the best thing that can ever happen to you, who cares about the afterlife?
I'm not sure where the idea of an afterlife entails that.
Well, you just try to think of the most horrible thing you could think of raping a kid under 1.
Right.
And it seems to me that that's the most horrible, easiest common denominator, that no matter who sits here, they're going to agree with you that that's the worst thing that can ever happen to somebody in their whole life.
Yeah. So
is to get raped and murdered.
Right, because it's.
But if there is an afterlife,
then we're not talking about their life anymore.
But I'm just saying, right, if there is an afterlife, then is whatever happens on this short blip, so good or bad, even, who cares?
Well, this is all we know that happens. That's the important part. This is all we know that we have, is life here. So talking about and figuring out the right thing to do in what situation seems to be the most important conversation that we can have. Because all we know
I disagree.
You feel like we know.
If you give me an afterlife, the possibility of an afterlife, I don't really give a shit what happens in 1 year or 70 years, because it's so small on an infinite scale of an afterlife.
But I wonder if that's true. So if
it doesn't matter if it's true or not.
If you were to be, so this is sort of the idea that
it is a possibility.
This is sort of the idea that religious people claim of atheists. They say, if there's no God and there's no afterlife, what we do doesn't matter. And you're saying if there is an afterlife, what we do doesn't matter.
Correct.
So,
that is a possibility.
Right.
I'm not saying that it's a truth.
Okay. So
that nothing we do here matters because there's an afterlife, but that is an alternate thought. That is an alternate universe in the Marvel whatever.
So I'm wondering how much that would scale with your actual worldview. So you believe that there could be an afterlife.
I believe in an afterlife.
Okay, so you believe in an afterlife, but you obviously believe that what you do matters.
Why? What have I done to prove to you that I care about anything in this world?
Well, I've only known you for a few years now, but it seems to me you display a lot of charitable traits that demonstrate to me that you believe what you do matters. So,
but it could be that because I'm here, I want to do something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think it has any bearing on the afterlife or what happened before I got here.
Well, so let me
I
ask.
don't even know why I'm here. I'm like, am I here because I did something wrong in the thing, and Earth is really a purgatory in itself? You know, like, what did I do beforehand that sentenced me to taking my soul from? And overall, I believe our souls are in a good spot, like a jelly bean jar or, a really cool place. And maybe coming to Earth is an experiment. God created Earth and He created some humans, but that clay, maybe I was clay over here, and being Play-Doh might be kick-ass on this side. But then He rolled me up and stuffed me in a little baby thing and made me live for 44 years so far. Gave me a wife and some kids, but those kids came, He sucked two other souls from somewhere else. Those might not have been attached to me before. They could even be a foe's. They could have been a foe that got assigned to be my kid, and we got to learn to work together and do it. And at the afterlife, do we remember anything that happened here? Is it a continuation? Do the rules change? Is there no longer physics and chemistry in the afterlife? And there's no longer art, and there's no longer he's and they's and she's and it's.
So, well, let me ask you this. So, it's correct to say that to you, the belief in an afterlife entails the conclusion that what we do here doesn't matter.
I'm saying it could be a possibility.
So you're not saying the afterlife could be a possibility. What you're saying is what could be a possibility is that what we do here doesn't matter.
Correct. I'm saying that's one equation.
Okay, but you believe in an afterlife.
I believe there's an afterlife.
If I ask you directly, does what we do here matter?
I don't know.
What would you say?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I have no clue.
That's interesting.
Because I can't get past the idea myself of that every other religion's wrong. If I was deity, I could definitely tell you that I want it run my way. And if you sat there and mocked me your whole life, I would smite the shit out of you.
But
I'm just saying, if I was deity, and you sat there your whole life, and I gave you good parents, I gave you life, I took you out of the pre-life that was a shitty cesspool of like little tadpoles, and I'm like, you know what, I'm putting you in the game today, Isaiah. I'm calling you up. I'm putting you in. I'm giving you 50 years of you do whatever the hell you could do and make me proud. And I'm truly interested. This is a science experiment. I'm going to see what Isaiah comes up with. And then about 15 years into it, you've met some girl or guy you really enjoy. You get to do the finer things in life. You have sex. You have some good scotch. You've experimented with whatever floats your boat.
Right.
And then you just get even more cynical. And you're like, fuck that guy. I don't even know if he's real or not. And I'm like, dude, did you forget me talking to you in the tadpole thing? And, and putting you in the game? Did you miss the whole pregame speech where I built you up and you were getting ready to execute whatever you wanted to do? Oh, what are you doing to that kid across the street? What the fuck is going on? And then you continue to go, oh, fuck God, maybe there is one, maybe there isn't, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, we hung out for like centuries beforehand. I might just go, you know what, well, fuck you if that's what you're going to do the rest of this life and zap you and kill you. Or I might let you be miserable for another 20 or 40 years and take things away from you and let your family die around you, or worse, let them still live and hate you and never talk to you and go out of their way to make your life miserable. And then, oh, you can't even get across the street. We're not even powerful enough to push gravity, and gravity is a really weak force.
So, as remarkable as that hypothetical is, I was trying to latch on to what exactly would be the most efficient use of my time to respond to.
There isn't one.
So, the idea where you said, did you forget the whole conversation I had with you when you were a tadpole? I think I could stand acquitted of that claim because I have no memory of a conversation I had with God while I was a tadpole. And
Right, but how much time have you spent on pondering a pre-life? I know you spent a lot thinking about an afterlife,
right?
But what about a pre-life?
Well, it doesn't come up often because I have no indication that there was a pre-life. I have no memory of a life before this one. I have no suggestion that I had a life before this one. Not even the slightest indication. Like so if you're talking with someone who says I want to believe what there's evidence to convince me of, I think I would be in a good position to say I don't believe in a pre-life because there's like I said, literally nothing that seems to go for that in that direction.
And I agree. I don't believe there is any proof. I don't believe anything I'm going to say is going to enlighten you in the slightest bit. But I do like you. I value what you've done and helped over the last year or two. I do like discussing these things.
I do.
But I can't prove it. That was my issue with the word theism, is it kept boiling down to prove it, and there is no proof, and there'll never be proof until it happens to us. Right. And by then, it's too late, but I don't have a solid belief that I will argue and beat you upside the head with and scream and cuss about which one of them's right, because as soon as you say one of them's right, that means all the other ones are wrong.
Right. Yeah, a lot of religions are pretty mutually exclusive that way.
They have to be. You know, I mean, your deity's either powerful or not. If he's not, then he's not worthy of worshiping.
No.
And if he doesn't align with my way of thinking, I don't want to worship him. And a lot of people don't, I think. I think they take that prerogative and don't follow that. And I'm not 100% sure at the end what the ramification is of ignoring a deity's wish. Or to claim ignorance.
But before we get to that, let me ask right quick. What do you think of Black Label and Perrier? What do you think?
I don't know. I think I'm gonna try it again.
Try it again. Okay. I'm gonna. I feel like I've drank most of the bottle. I'm gonna.
Do you mind if I have one more?
Oh, absolutely. I was feeling bad because I kept pouring me a glass, and like I said, I like to mix it about half and half. You know, it starts out like a kind of like a dark, like a Killian's kind of color, and then when I put in the Perrier, I try to bring it up to about a Miller Lite, and then.
I don't drink a lot of Perrier water.
This is the only time
by itself. I don't know what it is. I don't know because I drink a lot of carbonated shit. I mean, I drink Mountain Dew like it's going out of style and a half.
I couldn't.
So maybe it's the syrup because I hate a flat drink. Right. So I might not even really care about carbonation.
Right.
Well, I said flat. I hate a fountain drink with no syrup. When it's like all carbonated water.
Right.
And a tiny bit of thing. When it's off, I can't stand it. And Johnny Walker is probably not my favorite scotch out there. Like I said, my favorite to date is Lagavulin, and I haven't tried the other one. Mm-hmm. But I'm gonna have that opportunity. Maybe I'll invite you over, and because I do have the bottle.
Yeah.
And you can come drink it.
Johnny Walker is a strong number 2 for me. Number 1 is Balvenie, and the only problem is, and I haven't experienced this myself, but they say single malts are prone to be inconsistent. One single malt that you get from the distillery might
it's either good or bad.
Yeah,
I mean
that might one not malt taste good. You might get another one that's a single malt from the same distillery that tastes completely different. And that's why the blended malts are more popular, because if one of the blends is off, you're still going to get 90% of your
right.
And that's why Johnny.
I mean,
Walker,
that's what the definition of quality is consistency. It's not necessarily good.
Right.
Quality is that it's consistent and you put out the same product. So
Right.
The more things you use, the law of averages, it's going to be average every time, whether one little ingredient is off or not. So, yeah.
That's why the blended malts like Johnny Walker are, like I said, Black Label is a strong number 2, but Balvenie, just the flavor of it, I can almost drink it by itself.
My issue is peat. I drink Scotch for the peat, which is why I don't drink a whole lot of American whiskey, Irish whiskey, and bourbons, is because I like the peat addition.
Okay.
So I like the really peaty, dirty Scotches.
Dirty Scotch.
That's once you take away the peat, then you're just in the same category as any American or Irish.
Right.
To me, in my opinion. And then you're up against a way broader spectrum, right?
So I'm not that informed on Scotch. So is Black Label's not a peaty Scotch? I'm not that versed on Scotch.
I'm not tasting a whole lot of dirt or dinosaur.
I think if you had it without the Perrier, you might. But this is, like I said, this is the only time that I drink Perrier. This is like this.
I will. I'll do some pourings for you.
Okay.
One night. I'll invite you over.
Okay.
And we can either discuss this further at whatever point, and I'll let you try other ones.
Okay.
I'm not a huge Johnny Walker fan myself.
So
it's not bad.
So
it's just not my favorite.
Johnny Walker Black, Perrier. What do you think? 1 to 10.
I'm gonna give it a 5.
Okay. That's not good.
Well, when you tell me to rate something,
yeah.
Every time I go try a winery or distillery or something, I go through and I rate everything initially yes or no. So no's get 5s.
Okay.
Yeses get about a 7 on the first go through. And then I take anything that was rated a 7 that wasn't a 5, and I give it a second opinion. And then some 7s go down to 5s, and some 7s go up to 8 or 9. And then I give the last one out of that brand the 9, and that's what I would drink from then on from that brand until something new comes out.
Well, this is, to me, the Perrier makes it smooth. I try to.
Well, Perrier will do what it does to everything.
Yeah. I like the flavor of the Scotch, but pure Black Label is just a little bit strong for me. It's just a little bit.
Right, you're trying to turn the black into a red or a blue using Perrier.
I've tried red, and it's the same sort of experience, but it just doesn't. It doesn't have the flavor that black does. Red's 8 years.
I don't remember
something like that. This does taste much different than the red. And
what year is this one?
This is 12 years.
Okay, so it's red, black, blue.
Yep. Well, blue is the oldest. It's 20.
Right. So
like that,
I didn't remember what color was the age. So you're taking a fairly aged one, and you're trying to tone it down a little bit and age it with the Perrier instead of paying for the 20-year cost. You're trying to mellow out a fairly good one, a middle of the road one.
I've never had blue. I've never had it. Isn't it? It's pretty expensive, right?
It's like 200 bottle. Yeah, 200 plus.
I've never had blue, so it may be that this is what blue tastes like, and I've never had it.
I have had the opportunity to do blue, and I would never buy it.
Okay.
But that's because I'm not a Johnny Walker fan.
Right.
I've got a really great friend that loves Johnny Walker, and he does buy the blue at Christmas, and he'll give me like a flask of it. Now Stephanie enjoys it, and it's okay, but to me, it's just not. It's not mine, and that's okay. Just like the whole religion thing we're talking about,
right?
And the concept. I'm not mad that you enjoy it, you know.
Oh, no,
I'm not trying to persuade you that my version's better than yours. I'm happy that you like it, and I'm happy to experience it with you. But when you ask me what my opinion is,
yeah,
you know,
I get it.
I'm going to give you the rating because you asked. You know,
I get it.
I'm enjoying it. The experience is an 8 or a 9. I'm having a great time.
Me too.
I'm not sitting here like pissed off, like, damn, I wish I'd stayed home or told them I had to go to bed or rescheduled it. But,
well,
Johnny Walker is not it for me.
Right. Well, like I said, if I had Balvenie and Perrier is a little bit better.
I'm not even sure I like Balvenie.
Right, but
you have. And I'm not.
If you try it and don't like it, just know.
I know somebody I can gift it to.
Because I went to the same place you did to get a bottle earlier today, and they didn't have any. So
it's on the north end of town.
North end of town. Okay.
They had 9 bottles of the 12 on the shelf, and they had another 6 to 8 of the 14.
Okay.
Right next to it.
All right.
What I'll probably do is I'll keep the bottle and invite you over to drink it.
That's what we should do. Yeah.
Because I do keep a
pretty good mini bar. This is my little man cave down here. If you can't tell, this is where I go in the evening.
Well, I'm fortunate my wife drinks as well, so I don't have to use my library man space to house my alcohol. I get to stick it in the living room.
So earlier, right before we stopped, and I decided to ask you what you thought of my 5 out of 10 cocktail.
I am so sorry that you.
You know,
I think I offended you.
You know, I'm laughing about that.
I didn't want to offend you.
I'm not offended about that. You know, I'm laughing about it. So you were talking about answering to the idea of not being happy with this God's wishes. Okay. So the question that comes out of that is, how do we know what that God wishes?
We don't.
We don't.
We can't because we're not the deity.
So when it comes to the idea of stopping someone from committing a wicked act and things like that, all we have to go on is our moral conscience. Right?
You're hung up on what we have to do.
Well, no. What I mean is, the only tool we have to evaluate what we should do is our own mind, right?
You are hung up on this idea that you have to do everything either right or wrong, and you're thinking it to a standard that only a human can conceive. Is it possible that deity's plan is for us to make planet Zithron thrive in the future? Is it possible that a deity that knows more and is more powerful than us has a plan that we have no concept of, that we have no ability to do, or to know ahead of time? Right. So you're assigning a value to every single act here that could be immaterial to the deity's plan, because that's all you can focus on, because that's all you have the tools
that's all
is to worry about what I do today or I don't do today.
Right.
That's all we have the ability to do.
That's all we have.
But that doesn't mean that anything we do or do not is, what's the scientific word for it? Causality is not, correlation is not causality in statistics. Just because whatever we do or don't do does not mean it has any correlation to what the big picture is.
Sure. But the only thing I would add to that is that, you know, it's certainly possible that God's plan is that we end up on planet Zithra, whatever it was you called it. That could be. But I'm under no obligation to believe that's the case until it's demonstrated. So
you're never under any obligation.
Right. So
you can do whatever you want.
All we have to evaluate our own actions is our own minds and our moral conscience. That's all we have.
Yep.
Right.
And how stable is that? We have all kinds of people that get tired, mental illnesses.
Right.
So how stable is your tool?
So this is
all your tools that you have
So this is a really interesting topic to get into. I've had this conversation with a lot of people before. A lot of those conversations weren't put on the YouTube channel or anything. To me, by my assessment, there's 3 reasons someone would not act in accordance with the moral conscience. There's 3 reasons. Since that's essentially what we're talking about, right? Whether someone will behave morally or not.
That's what you want. That's what you're talking about.
Right. Isn't okay? It seemed like that's where we had gotten to, because the observation you were making was that different people behave differently when it comes to my moral conscience compared to someone else's.
Right.
What they view as right.
I might not have the same moral conscience you do.
So
I might not even have the ability to have the same moral conscience as you do.
So I've tried to fit this. I've tried to conform my worldview to what I experience. And what seems to be the case to me is that, first, the position that everyone's moral conscience effectively tells them the same thing at a fundamental base level, like when it comes to the very obvious questions, very obvious moral situations, that everyone's moral conscience tells them the same thing. There's 3 reasons, in my observation, just in my life experience, that this would not play out. First is physical damage to the brain. And this would include like mental disabilities and things. If there could be
never developed is the same as being damaged.
Right. So
okay.
It could be something like got damaged in an accident, or that it never developed, like you're saying. So that would include physical. That's been shown in researches in neurosciences, that there's certain parts of the brain that, when damaged, the ability to distinguish between right and wrong is compromised. That's been shown. They've even narrowed that down to certain areas of the brain that, when damaged, mathematics becomes a problem, and speech. They know which parts of the brain are for that. So that first one is very well documented. Second is the conscious decision to act against your moral conscience. The very obvious manifestation of that is greed. Someone would steal from someone else, knowing that it's wrong. They'd steal because greed is overriding the moral conscience. It's saying to have this money is better.
Or maybe not even greed. Maybe it's necessity.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Greed is the most obvious manifestation of that. But it could be that someone's hungry, they're broke, so they steal food.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's someone acting against their moral conscience. They know that stealing's wrong, but
they have to eat.
Yeah, right.
Eat or die.
Then third is religious or otherwise indoctrination. These are people that believe, based on their religious convictions or other indoctrination, like political indoctrination, that acting against their moral conscience is beneficial, to not act in agreement with their moral conscience. Those 3 situations, it seems to me, is the reason someone would act against their moral conscience. But my belief, my creed, as it were, as you could say, is that everyone has at base level the same moral conscience. That everyone knows better, unless one of those 3 situations, of course 2 of them, they do know better. But the one, the physical damage to the brain, is they don't know better. But the other 2, they know better, but they're still acting against it. So if I talk with someone that has a different moral position than me on a fundamental moral problem, when discussed further, I can usually uncover one of those 2 sources. Either they're conscientiously acting against it. Usually it's religious indoctrination. For some reason, they're acting against it. And everyone that I've ever discussed something with that had a fundamentally different position than me on a ground level, like a very clear moral position, it's been religious or political. There's some kind of indoctrination going on. And I think it's my responsibility.
But you never indoctrinated. So it's not your bias; it's theirs.
So let me. That's what I was just getting ready to get to. It seems to me to be our responsibility to free ourselves from as many of those biases as possible, to try to act as free of brainwashing or indoctrination as we can. That's the importance of looking for fallacies, of looking for logical contradiction, because you can expose where your own biases are. Does that make sense?
I don't know. I think
not do you agree with it?
I think
I'm just
you're.
asking if that makes sense.
I don't know. Yeah, I think you can always break things down to basic needs in religion. I think that is the foundation of the human experience.
Basic needs, or
Yeah, the food,
yeah,
the need for love, the need for shelter,
yeah. So
and a believe in a higher power to try to. I think that's all to explain this existence. I think that is the foundation of every person.
sure, yeah.
Now, some people have some granite foundations, some people have some rocky foundations, some people have sandy foundations.
Yeah, so I would just say, based on that,
But, you boiled it down to the three things, and the first one was the damage to the brain, and we know, and blah, blah, blah. But we only know because we damaged people's brains while they were under observation and then noticed a change. So we did an evil act to a person.
sure, yeah, that could be the case, but I think a lot of times those observations are made post someone with a damaged brain.
Sure.
But I don't think that, to my knowledge, at least recently, I don't know that was anybody intentionally removing part of the brain to observe that phenomenon. It very likely happened in the past, but it's still something that seems to me to be very well documented. Is that there are certain parts of the brain that are attributable to language, that are attributable to mathematics, and
there are a lot of German Nazi
right
documented cases of
that's what I'm saying. Recently,
experimenting on people.
I'm sure it has been done in the past, and like
why would it stop now?
The whole
so all our scientists are now morally great, and
no, I just think.
And why are they morally great?
I think that in a lot of countries, laws have been made against it. That is not to say that I know that it doesn't go on. I'm just saying that it shouldn't go on, that anybody intentionally damages part of the brain.
But it's for the good of science.
But what does happen is someone unable to perform mathematical calculations. There was one guy that he was a serial killer, and I forgot his name. He was the shooter in the tower at a university. I forget exactly his name. He said, when they convicted him, he said, well, when I die, I want my brain to be dissected, and for someone to look and see if they can figure out what's going on. So that's what happened. After he died, they took his brain apart and found out that he had a brain tumor pushing on the part of the brain that's had every indication of governing moral behavior. There was a brain tumor there. Now,
how comforting to all the victims' families are.
No, it's not.
That's the silver lining.
I would not claim
that's the silver lining you're looking at. He committed all those evil acts, and hey, it fell under Section 1 of a damaged brain, and he's now excused from doing all that because he no longer had the reason and the moral basis that we all had. Because he didn't, because it was pushing it.
That silver lining is not worth it. To anyone with a moral conscience that can observe it, it is not worth it.
But he fell under the Section 1, and they dissected it and found that.
Remember, though, when we go back to that question, we're talking about what God did.
Why did he get the cancer?
Who to a theist is responsible for that tumor? To a theist.
God allowed it.
God allowed that cancer, or caused it. Just saying. We're going to acknowledge that position.
I'm going to give you the allowed.
Yeah. So
I believe he allows all this stuff to happen.
Yeah. So what if to a theist, God's the reason that guy had cancer. So what he did is ultimately then traced
I
back
may
to God.
be somewhat theistic. I will give you that I believe God allowed that guy to get cancer.
And didn't stop.
Didn't stop the cancer's growth.
Didn't stop the guy from doing what he did.
Did not do that.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Because this is just one possible silver lining. Because if he had never done that, he never would have been caught. He never would have got his brain dissected. And they never would have found the tumor there on the part that is close to the thing, and reinforced all those previous studies that we do apply X amount of pressure to this area, it may be possible that they behave this way.
Yeah. So that is not the case on which all that research rests. But I get what you're saying. That's not the foundational case. I think that's a very observable part of neuroscience, regardless of whether or not that guy even existed. It's still, that's just an example of that.
Yeah, but every example is another addition in the summation of the N to give you enough case study for it to be significant. It's another data point.
Yeah, so
that points towards whatever data you're trying to point.
So that's my only point there was that there seems to be three reasons people act in contradiction to their moral conscience. So, given that, I don't believe myself that at the root, me and anybody else on this planet would have a different moral conscience. I think that they choose, either through religious indoctrination or otherwise, if they've come to a different conclusion than me, they've got some overriding factor which convinces them otherwise. And to me, I think the best way to make sure that you're not influenced by some kind of brainwashing or indoctrination is by applying reason, searching for fallacy, and looking for logical contradiction, and making sure that you're as free of those problems as you can be.
You do realize that searching and engineering and problem solving and stuff is a very small part of the population, right?
The what now? What do you mean?
You and the whole idea of trying to learn things is a very small part of the population. Like, not everybody has this drive to figure out. There's like a huge segment of the populace that wants nothing to do but to eat, drink, and fuck.
Sure.
And
yeah.
And they can do the same boring, repetitive thing every single day, and they don't care, and they never think, what if? And they never look up and go, I wonder why the sky's blue.
Sure.
And is there a God? And they never have this. They're like a small part of the world.
Yeah. No, I'm describing the.
And you're trying to break you down and make you common with everybody else out there. And I don't think you can. You say at the base that we all have the same moral code. I disagree. I think everybody is unique. And we're not all alike. And I maybe am only the way I am because my needs are being met right now. And I have enough money to eat. And I have a wife to satisfy me for the last 23 years. Right. And I have a good life. And I might be a hellacious guy tomorrow if I go home and find out all that's stripped from me, that I don't have a house, and the locks are changed, and my wife is no longer my wife, and I can't get to the things I need to do tomorrow. And then I turn to my friend, and you're like, well, I went to bed, so you don't answer the door when I'm beating on it again. And, and then I got to start going, well, what am I going to do tonight? And everybody I turn to doesn't help me. And all of a sudden, my world's upside down. And then I got to think about breaking into somebody's house that's not there. And
well, so let me ask you this, because that seems to me to be at the heart of any kind of moral judgment. Is to be able to look at someone committing a certain act and say that they know better. If you can't say that, then no one is a criminal. You got to be able to look at any act and say they knew better than to do that. And to me, I feel like I can look at people committing these acts and say they knew better.
You see, that's the same reasoning that happened with the Spanish Inquisition and the Salem witches and anybody that ever got persecuted in all your slavery. They knew better than to get on that boat. They knew better than to do this. They knew better, and you're defining what better is.
No, I think that's the they knew better part is for, and I don't want to get too deep into that aspect because I know that can be a deep conversation. But whoever is enslaving the people knew better. I would never say that the slaves should have known better than to become slaves, because I know that was involuntary. And I think in every case of real slavery, that's involuntary. There are cases of not real slavery where it was voluntary, where you have people like indentured servants. That's not voluntary. But actual chattel slavery is involuntary. And the they should have known better statement applies to those enslaving others. And I would bet that if I had a conversation with someone who was enslaving other people, and we really dug down to why they felt they had the right to do so, it would either be political or religious indoctrination that got them there.
Really? I don't agree.
I do.
I don't believe.
I agree with myself.
I don't believe that people that do that have one iota of care of religious indoctrination or what was the other one? Political.
Well, the primary and almost exclusive defense of slavery in America was by the church.
No, it wasn't. It was by the slave holders.
No. Their what they leaned against was biblical language. That's very well documented. That it was they felt they had the religious right to
come at me against anything that I do, and I'm going to use everything in my power to justify it.
I'm not sure what you mean. What do you?
It's all about the ego and the id to me, and that the person, the slaveholder, wants to be a slaveholder because he doesn't want to till all that fucking cotton.
Yeah.
And he wants to own the whole entire world and everything he can see. Mm. And I need more money, and there's not a figure that's enough. It's always more. And it's the same as your head of the CEOs of all these companies. It's not because I'm a Christian and I'm spreading God's word and I'm enslaving people. So it's not a political, and it's not because I'm a Republican or a Democrat. So my motivation is not political or religious. Do I use them as tools to get what I want? Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you, you're going to come over and be like, hey, Mike, do you really need 100 people tilling your cotton field? You know, you beat the shit out of that one guy and you raped her and she's already had like 5 of your kids. You think you could, like ease up on it a little bit? It kind of makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
And I'm like, fuck you. Stay on your property over there. Right? Or I could be like, come on, Isaiah. It says in the Bible that Joseph was a slave and something else. Now, do I truly believe the Bible? And I'm using that belief and conviction to spread the good word? No. I'm telling it to you, so you shut the fuck up and go back on your own property and leave me the hell alone.
This is an important observation, because it's important to understand what I mean when I say where the religious indoctrination is. Because if I come over to your house and say, how are you keeping all these slaves and beating them and working them in the fields like this and claiming to own their children and all these things, you're going to come at me with, well, biblically.
I'm going to come at whatever I know about you to be able to twist it.
Let's just say, so you come at me with the religious, because that's the one thing everybody could count on. It's the one book everybody knew everybody else had. So you come at me with the religious, and you try to convince me that biblically what you're doing is fine. That is indoctrination. You understand what I'm saying? That's the indoctrination. You're convincing me to overlook what you're doing because of what you believe God said. And you know that everybody has that book around you. You know everyone has that book. So the indoctrination is from you to me to convince me that what you're doing is okay.
Right, but that doesn't mean I believe it.
No, it doesn't. But it also means that you're overriding your moral conscience because of greed. So would you look at the slave owner back then and say that they didn't know better? Or would you say that they were being greedy?
Okay, what I'm saying is they're definitely greedy. That's the short answer. But I'm also not sure about the know better.
If they don't know better, then they have been so indoctrinated by the belief that what they're doing is morally permissible, then it's an indoctrination.
I don't think they cared. They
Then
could
it's
have been
greed.
atheists.
If they don't,
No,
they,
I'm definitely saying greed is the easy answer.
right.
It's greed.
Yeah.
But
So-
they might not have any morals. And you were trying to say that deep down we all got the same morals. And they know better.
Yeah, I think.
What if there is no better for them? What if, that might not have been wrong to them.
It could be the case that they don't know better. But when I've had situations where I'm talking to someone like I am to you, and we have some kind of fundamental disagreement at the ground level about some kind of moral situation, when we've dug deeper, what comes out, what kind of rears its head is either indoctrination or greed.
You're saying they got indoctrinated? Or they're trying to...
I've done my best throughout my life, but there could be more of it. There's definitely less of it.
I mean, when you're saying you talked to somebody that was opposed to you, I'm assuming it happened.
So yeah,
and you've got a case you can think of. So are you saying that guy was trying to indoctrinate you?
No. I'm
at
saying,
the base, or somebody indoctrinated them at their a long time ago.
That's the case. So the one that most recently comes to mind is someone that said to me that homosexuals deserve to be killed. There was no way to defend that statement on reason or on logic. The only way to defend it was because that's what God wants. So when we discovered
and then they said God wants that because, and then they pointed to the Old Testament, to Leviticus or whatever,
right.
Which to me is a history example. I don't look at the Old Testament as... I don't believe those rules apply to me.
Sure, I don't either. Yeah,
I don't believe the Old Testament rules apply to the modern day Christian.
I'm just giving you an example.
Right.
Where fundamentally at a base level, I don't believe homosexuals deserve to be killed. Fundamentally at a base level, they did. And when I said, okay, defend it with reason and logic, the closest they could come to was that homosexual sex doesn't produce
more people and help the human race.
Which morally makes them the same as though they were not here. Which means that to kill a homosexual actually doesn't change the situation at all. They're either not having kids or they're not having kids. So it's the same situation. So then you just have the moral compromise of killing someone. So there's actually no way of actually logically and with reason defending the position that you should kill someone for being homosexual. There's no way to do it. The only way to defend it and to actually make that argument is with religion. And that was a pure case of religious indoctrination. They believe that God wants homosexual death. And that means that the fundamental belief is a result of indoctrination.
But now you're fucked because you didn't do anything about it. You didn't kill that guy.
Well, I don't. If
I know, but you didn't stop him on a different moral base. And if in a week or 3 weeks from now he does go kill a homosexual because God told him to do it, you did nothing in the meantime.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. So,
So now you're just as
I
morally
have to.
culpable
I have
as
to.
he is. And now you got to struggle with that every second from now on. Now that you've realized that
Yeah.
inactivity has done nothing,
I
and now
have
you
to.
got to decide whether you kill him or not, or turn him in,
I
or
try
try to
to.
get him arrested so he can't kill any gay people.
I try to rely on my belief that depending on how well I know somebody, I know you well enough that if you were to say to me that you took the Old Testament so seriously that you believe homosexuals deserve to be put to death, I know you well enough that I don't believe you would do that. That if given the opportunity, you wouldn't kill the homosexual. That you might profess belief in that, but I don't know that you would actually carry that out. I think your heart would override that attempt. Now, I feel the same way about the person telling me this, but the act of saying it is immoral to me. I think the act of saying that, of even saying that person just deserves to die, I think it's every time someone defends that position, they
And
further.
I'm just kind of curious if you're telling yourself that so you can sleep at night.
Oh, it is. I'm sure part of it is that.
You know, like, so you're hoping he doesn't do it.
Absolutely, yeah. But now the difference, because I'm sure that if someone heard us having this conversation, they would try to compare it to the guy that killed the girl. The difference is that in the hypothetical situation that I place us in is that we know what he's doing, or we discover that he is doing it. That's the situation in which it's immoral to
Right,
not.
it's not premeditated.
Right.
Right.
It's immoral to not act. In this situation, it's wondering whether or not someone's
He is going to act.
Right.
If they're strong enough to make him act.
Yeah. So that's what I mean by that. But I do believe that the harder we work at, as you might hear familiar language, the harder we work at divesting our hearts and consciences of these kinds of things, the harder we work at discovering fallacies and logical contradictions, the freer our moral conscience can operate. The clearer we hear what's right and wrong, with the harder we work to divest us of it. Does that make sense?
It does. And again, I still go to, I'm not sure that anything we do or don't do here has any bearing on the whole thing. I can't explain why we're here because I don't know where we came from. So I took the Clifton research thing, and one of my strengths is I like learning and I like history to understand motive behind people. My leadership style is to figure out what motivates you by examining what's happened to you in the past, looking for patterns, and then I can kind of predict what will motivate you to move further and increase in what you're doing. So and this has been recent since we've talked, I am dumbfounded on, like I keep saying, the pre part.
Okay.
I'm just as perplexed at what happened before I was born to what's going to happen afterwards, and I'm not sure any of the middle has any bearing. Now, I understand. I believe it probably does. I think I'm here as a result of something that happened before, and I think it's all going to help over there. But I can't prove it, and I'm not entirely sure, and it's just as probable that it doesn't.
Right. I don't know.
I guess calculus and infinity and summing up and never being able to sum up enough because there's always another digit to the right of that decimal. You never get to 1. It's always 0.9999999. You know, forever. You never get to 1.0.
So I'm not sure that you could say that it's just as possible. And let me, before we get to that conversation, tell me what you see as the problem with this statement. And this is why I believe what we do matters. All we know that exists is, all we know is that we have this life. And all we know is that we have this universe, and all we know is that we can choose things. Like, these are just observable facts about who we are, what we are, and where we are. These are the things we know. And what I know is that based on what I know, what I do matters. What I do matters to what I know. Now, what you're saying is proposing all these things that may possibly be that would render what I do meaningless. But what we know for sure, what we do matters to that. It matters to what we know for sure. So what we know for sure is we have this life. And we know that what we do matters to this life and to other people having their life. We're sharing this life with other people. We know that. So when it comes to all the other possible things, that maybe there's an infinite afterlife, maybe there's an infinite pre-life, those are things worthy of discussion. But when it comes to what we know, our behavior matters to what we absolutely know is the case. And the rest of it is discussed and should be discussed as possibility. But the default position should be, well, as far as what we know, what we do matters. So
I don't know that it matters. I'm not sure anything I've ever done matters.
Well, you certainly act as though it does.
Well, no, because I haven't just given up. I haven't just stopped and sit at home and do nothing. But if I'm being honest, I don't know that any of it ever matters. I mean, 10 years ago, I was probably really, really hungry at some point and had to make the moral dilemma. Do I steal that hamburger or don't? I don't have enough money. And I stole it and ate it. And I wasn't hungry anymore. And then later on, I worked a little bit more and bought somebody else a hamburger so they didn't have to steal a hamburger, and paid it back to the people I stole it to and tried to rectify the wrong. But right now, at 44, does that really matter? Is there anybody even alive that remembers? I don't even remember, and I'm alive. So
that could come down to very fine examples of where whether or not it matters is questionable. Like, that I will definitely concede that you could get down to so minute of an example that it may or may not have played out. But let's say just the obvious case: you come upon you're walking along a trail and someone is drowning in the water next to you, and you save them. I am perfectly confident in saying that what you did mattered to that person.
But not if that person ended up being evil,
or
did another evil act later on.
That's something we don't know. So I'm talking about just what we know in that situation. Saving that person from drowning matters.
But we do know. I mean, that has happened. I've been in combat zones, and other people have been in combat. We have helped kill people. We have saved people.
Right, and
it doesn't matter. Like a month later, they died of something else. So
yeah,
you stop this person from doing something. I pulled him out of the way of getting run over by a truck. Mm-hmm. 2 months later, he breaks his ankle, gets on a helicopter, and gets blown the fuck out of the air. And 2 months later. And me pulling him out of there didn't do shit. He was still in the same shithole for 2 months. He still...
But didn't you...
Well, on the flip side, who am I to say whatever he did in that 2 months didn't matter either?
But so... I don't know if this is a real story. I didn't know if that was hypothetical.
I didn't pull him out of a thing, but there were lots of instances of people coming to a near-death experience. And then they still die either the next day or something else.
So let's say the story is that you saved somebody like this from pulling out of the wreckage or something. They were going to get burned alive.
Right.
And then 2 months later they get killed.
Anyways.
Those 2 months matter to me.
Why?
Because that's 2 months that the person can go on living and pursue whatever it is they feel worthy of
They
pursuing.
couldn't pursue anything. They were still in the same desert. They still had to go war for that 2 months. Their life was not improved, right?
But
So
it's
think of
better
it as
than
somebody
dying,
on
right?
death row. You excommunicate them. You don't kill them on right away. You let them sit on death row for 2 years and do an appeal and do an appeal and do an appeal, and then you kill them
But
on like the third appeal. Now you're gonna say all that time mattered, even though they were the one that raped the little kid
that's
3 years ago.
that's a different. I want to go back to the situation we're talking about. So,
But I'm just saying, to me, it's the same thing. You're given. There's a point in time where we saved them, or we saved them, or we didn't kill them. Either way, bad act or the good act. And then you give them X amount of life,
mhm.
and then it ends. Whether we killed them because of something they did 3 months ago, or the not deity killed them 2 months later. Either way, you can't quantify what they did, positive or negative, in that 2 months. And you can't prove that it was positive.
Well, to me,
I mean, just by them being able to be alive.
to me,
Because being alive to me isn't enough to be sacred, or
yeah, I think that's where our
I
disconnect.
think that's where it gets to me, that being alive is not enough of an excuse
to not kill
to
somebody.
be mattered.
So yeah, that seems to be our disconnect. To me, the saving someone's life, even if they die 2 months later, matter, because that's 2 more months that they can continue to live and pursue whatever it is they're pursuing, and continue to hopefully experience happiness. And you've given them 2 months just on your own act. You've given them 2 months to pursue that. Maybe it's
Okay.
maybe
Okay,
it's
put it this way. I just thought of a different example. My wife's a hospice nurse.
Mm-hmm.
She delays somebody dying by giving them medicine,
mm-hmm.
but that same 2 months, they're just shitting themselves. They're still coughing all the time.
Yeah, that's definitely.
They don't have a quality of life.
Yeah,
right?
That's definitely a different.
But she's still giving them more life medically.
Yeah.
The life support and all that other stuff, and they don't have a quality of life.
Yeah, that's definitely a little bit different situation, because.
But you're still giving them life.
If you save a child that has every ability, as far as you know, to live a good, productive life because you saved them, that's very different than the situation that you're describing, which has a lot of caveats and discussion. I can't find a reason to oppose doctor-assisted suicide. I can't. I've thought about it every way I can. I cannot think of any reason to oppose that. If someone is in their right mind and has the ability to make that decision, I think they should have that.
But if they're in the right mind, they should want life.
No,
because if they're in the right mind, they can still contribute.
If they understand,
or they could still pursue happiness.
If they understand that they're bedridden and that they're going to be in pain for whatever little bit of time they have left, I think they have the right to make that choice to end their life. But I think everyone.
I'm just not so sure your. I don't know.
Let me.
Your attachment to life. I don't understand where it comes from. Maybe it's the only thing you can physically touch or have an idea on.
So let's work on, over the next 10, 15 minutes here. Let's work on trying to wrap up everything for the video.
Oh, sure.
And then we'll continue the conversation after that.
Whatever.
So, since we're on the topic of doctor-assisted suicide, I'll say this. I think that anybody um, that has a good understanding and has it explained to them what the rest of their life is going to look like. If it's going to be in extreme pain the rest of their life, and it's, if someone's given 3 months to live and they're going to be in extreme pain, I can't find any reason logically or ethically to oppose their decision. I think that should be their right to make that decision.
Sure. Now, what happens when it sets a precedent for their kid, who is a minor, that it's okay to give up?
You mean that their decision is going to affect their child's perception
Oh yeah.
of life? Well, hopefully, again, this is just my belief. Hopefully,
And then the kid gets a little upset that their dad just died, and somebody just stole their blood sandwich at school. And they're like, fuck it, I'm gonna make the choice to kill myself.
I
My
get
dad killed himself.
there's all kinds of ways that these things can play out in the future. I'm just saying that I can't see with that act itself. I can't argue myself to any ethical or moral position that someone, if they're going to live, a very short time in extreme pain, shouldn't be allowed to make that decision for themselves. That's all I know there's all kinds of possible results of that. Just like there's possible results of anything that can happen. So all we really have is the ability to evaluate decisions specifically. So in this case, the decision is, or the question, it seems to me, is whether or not we should allow the doctors or the medical staff to assist that and not charge them with murder. Right? That seems to be the ethical dilemma, is that. But that may not be. That seems to be the ethical dilemma. The problem that most people have is that the doctor, swore an oath to do no harm, and here he is assisting this person's suicide.
I don't want to be the one that determines what's acceptable and what's not.
Well, no,
if you open it up to stage 4 but not stage 3 cancer,
right.
I don't want to get into that. To me, it's right and wrong. If it's okay for a doctor to help somebody kill themselves at any point, it's okay for that doctor to kill themselves at any point.
Well,
who am I to define what is rational or?
But you said it's
acceptable?
either right or wrong, though. Right.
Right. It's on or off to me.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna say it's okay when you've got 90% of your lung eaten up with cancer for somebody to help you die, and it's okay for you to commit suicide and go against the plan that's for your life, you're voluntarily giving up whatever life when you commit suicide. It might be painful. It might not be the best quality of life you've ever had, but it was still life that you gave up, and you cashed back in and said, I don't need that. Right? So again, what gives me the right to judge at what point that is, and what gives you the right to agree and make it morally acceptable and the law and regulate it for the doctor at any point?
Yeah, so I want to make that clear, that I'm not saying that my view should be part of regulation or legislation or anything.
But somebody's has to be.
I'm just telling you how my approach to these things, how my moral conscience approaches them. So we all have the ability to determine how we view these things. And I'm just telling you how I view it.
Right.
I'm not saying that my view should override anyone else's. I'm just saying this is how I view it.
But our lawmakers have to think one way or the other and then legislate it. And then that legislation, whether it's your indoctrination or your political ideology, comes into play. And then that's what drives the moral majority. Right?
Yeah, because those are elected officials. Yeah.
So you're now basing all this supposition. You and I are free to sit here and think about it or
Mhm.
whatever. But at the root of it, that problem has to be solved by somebody. Maybe not you, but
Yeah.
somebody who is
So
just as qualified as you or me or anybody else, because all we are people.
So would you say that nobody has the ability to make that decision?
Correct.
So if someone is, let's say someone's told you've got months
Either
to live,
nobody has it or everybody has it.
but who makes the decision whether it's nobody or
That
everybody?
person.
So it's up to them.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
saying, I personally don't think it's right because you were given extra life by a creator who knows way more than you and I do. So he might have a reason for you to go through those things. There might be a silver lining. Just because you can't define that silver lining does not mean it does not exist.
But wait. So if that creator allows you the process of doctor-assisted suicide, is that not his plan playing out as well?
In my religion, he allowed his son to be crucified. He allowed a bad atrocity to happen because there was a silver cloud
Okay, so
for millions of other people.
So if the person asks for assisted suicide and they're given it, why do you not assume there's a silver lining because God allowed it? Wouldn't, if they're successful, there have to be a silver lining?
Doesn't have to.
But
there
it seems
may
like
be.
it seems
I'm
like
not saying there isn't one or there is. I'm saying I don't have the ability to tell you
Yeah.
one way or the other.
But if so it seems like if
You're taking binary yes and no's, and because it's not a no, you can't say it's not a yes.
Yeah.
And I'm saying if you reduce the whole world to zeros and ones and say that, then your creator is not all powerful. He had to build this stuff based on a set of rules that are higher than him.
Well, let me try to phrase that a different way, because there was an important point that I wanted to make there. So if the person finds out that he's got 2 months to live, you're saying that the creator gave him these other 2 months, and that to say, and that to request
The suicide
the
ahead of
suicide,
time could not be playing out that person's
right?
destiny.
So, but if he requested it and it happened and it was successful, and this person's life ended 2 months early, how I feel like we wouldn't be able to say that that wasn't God's plan either. It seems like if he requests this suicide 2 months ahead of time and gets it, that it would be just as reasonable to say that was part of God's plan.
Yes.
Right?
No. And it goes back to the very first sentence. I'm not going to agree, no matter how many times you reword it or show a different way. I don't agree that just because something happens contrary to another plan that it's also the plan, or that there's no silver lining, or there is. I don't know what the plan was.
Right.
The plan might have been for him to kill himself. I can't tell you that's not it. But then, if he does kill himself, he didn't have the 2 months of extra life.
Mm-hmm.
It's moot. There was no 2 other months of extra life.
Right.
So it's not guaranteed that he had the 2 or 3. Just because a doctor tells you got 6 months to live, doesn't mean you got 6 months to live.
Right.
You can die the next week, or you might die 2 or 3 years later. Just because you get a diagnosis doesn't mean that that's what's guaranteed.
Right.
I do also believe you're going to die when you're going to die, which has allowed me to do dangerous things with confidence, jump out of airplanes, get shot at,
right.
get blown up,
The
fly out to places where other people just died a minute ago in a helicopter,
right.
and go assess the situation.
The,
And I felt totally safe the whole time.
if it's your time kind of view.
I do
Is that
have
what you're
that.
Yeah.
I do have that. Now, I do believe that suicide is the free will to change it, and that humans don't have to do God's will. I don't
Right.
think you have to do what His plan is for you. But
But-
that doesn't relieve you from the consequences of not fulfilling it.
But in that
Your
case,
calling.
though, your decision would alter God's plan.
I believe so.
Right. That's an interesting discussion to have, and that would be one to pursue, I think, at a different time.
But that's the
I
way
think-
that's the way I think.
Or we could keep pursuing it after, but I think I need to go ahead and stop.
Whatever you
I
want.
think it's got another 4 minutes left on the SD card.
I am not worried about the camera at all.
Well,
I know you are. You do whatever you want to do. Because I feel kind of bad that you're going to have to go through this
Oh no, that's all right.
3 hours again
No, that's all right.
to
That's all right.
edit it.
Um,
And I'm not sure that there's anything worth salvaging or
But-
showing to any other person.
the majority of the people that watch these videos are actually people that aren't on YouTube and that I send them to, and they watch. And some of these videos I've shared, they're like 2.5 hours long. People watch them and will text me and say, at 1 hour and 43 minutes you said this, and what it causes. To me, it's when it comes to conversation, these are the topics that are the only ones really worth spending a lot of time thinking about, is these. And I really value these kinds of philosophical discussions. And I've told a lot of people that I have these discussions with, like some people I'll start talking about and they'll say, well, Kant said this, and Freud said, and they'll get all into it, and I'm like, one of the things that I always say is, I don't want to talk about philosophers. I want to talk to philosophers. So, to me, the conversation that we're having is two philosophers. We're talking about our philosophy on life, and to me, it only further clarifies our views. It's like I won't be able to help. I won't be able to not hear some of the things you've said later when I'm thinking about different ideas. Like I will helplessly recall the things that you're talking about, and they'll come up in my mind. And that's why I like these discussions, is that it only helps.
I hope it does help you. Like the scotch, I don't know personally if it helped me. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I liked hanging out with you. It could have just as easily been banging out the 17 on the range, and it'd been just as fun to me. But
well,
I don't know. You can turn it off.
Let me go ahead and
Stand up,
stop.
turn it off.
Let me go ahead and stop the video and everything. We'll keep talking, but I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and that way we'll do.
Okay.